Hello and welcome to the channel. Welcome to Time Trek. Death really is the great equalizer. Every single person who's ever lived will die. Every single one of you watching will die. Some deaths are more famous than others. Some deaths are more important than others. Some deaths a bit meaningless. There's a famous death of an ancient Greek who had a tortoise dropped on his head from an eagle, because eagles like to drop tortoises on rocks. And this particular ancient Greek was a bald man, so obviously the eagle mistook his bald head for a rock. The rest is history. So today we're going to be looking at the WatchMojo channel, a bit of a controversial channel in the history. It gets a lot of views, many millions of views every single day. It's a big channel, but it can be a bit history for the masses and sometimes it can gloss over a little bit of detail. So hopefully today we're going to be adding a little bit of detail. I have not seen this video before. This is a reaction video. Hopefully I'll pause it and add a little bit of commentary, see what I think about their personal choice of a top 10. My own personal list, I've decided to write up a little personal list of my own top 10. So coming in at number 10, my personal top 10 that I did, I've put John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy, who was obviously assassinated on the 22nd of November 1963 by Lee Harvey Oswald. We won't get into all the conspiracy theories, but the man definitely died. His head was shot off, well, for the most part. The reason I think this is a death that changed the world, I wouldn't say it had many political ramifications. I'd say more in just the cultural zeitgeist and how immediate news is reported. Obviously, you had the famous Walter Cronkite interrupting a drama in America. Yeah, the immediacy of these were the shots that were heard around the world, and the fact I think it changed immediate news that was happening live, to the modern news that we have now, which is a 24-hour rolling news cycle that we have now. My number ninth choice is Socrates. Socrates the great philosopher of ancient Greece, and went on to inspire Plato, who went on to inspire Aristotle, who went on to teach Alexander the Great. We all know the story about the Athenian school and the founding of philosophy. One commentator said that of Plato's work, in which Socrates is a big part, Plato is basically all of Western philosophy, and everyone else that's ever contributed to Western philosophy is just adding footnotes to Plato. So I think the death of Socrates is quite a big event. Number 8, I put in Joan of Arc. Obviously, Joan of Arc's death, probably a martyrdom, might have helped to inspire the French to victory in the 100 Years' War, which obviously transformed the balance of power in Europe and allowed France to continue to be the major power of Christendom in the Middle Ages. My number 7th choice is the death of Tsar Nicholas II and the bringing in of the Soviet regime under Lenin. Obviously, there was attempts to try and free the Tsar and his family when the White Army was invading Russia in the early 20s, but then obviously the Red Army, the Soviets, decided to take the action to kill and murder the entire family of Tsar Nicholas II in order that they could not be brought back to re-establish a monarchical system in Russia. My number 6th choice is the death of Abraham Lincoln, another American president, another assassination, this time by John Wilkes Booth in the Ford's Theatre. I just think the death of Abraham Lincoln significantly hampered the Reconstruction efforts. Obviously, then you get the Andrew Johnson coming in, who is, in my opinion, the worst president who has ever lived. Not a good president. My number 5th choice is Alexander the Great. Obviously, Alexander the Great's legends are literally that, the stuff of legends. His story and his conquests and victories have been taught and told and romanticized for 2,500 years. Obviously, the man dies very young at the height of his empire, and there was talk of where he was going to go next. Was he going to go to Rome, perhaps? Was he going to go try and reconquer India, where they'd stopped in the previous campaign? There was big questions about where he was going to go next, and obviously that never happened because he died and the empire collapsed pretty much as soon as he died and divided into a series of sub-kingdoms. My number 4th choice is, I'm going to say, Mustache Man, who came from Austria. I think we all know who that was. Obviously, he kind of had to die to end World War Two. Obviously, a lot of build up to World War Two was appeasing Angry Mustache Man. Say what you want about Angry Mustache Man, but he did kill Angry Mustache Man. But coming in at number three, I've put Julius Caesar, obviously ending the Roman Republic and ushering in the empire that was first emperor, or who was to be his great nephew, Augustus, a death that is still renowned throughout history, still echoes through history. Beware the Ides of March. Now, my number two choice is Louis the 16th and the end of the French monarchy that had been in charge of France, or the Hugh Capet line had been in charge of France for about 1,000 years. The monarchical system had been in place even longer than that, dating back all the way to Charlemagne. Obviously, under Louis the 14th, we had the absolutist monarchy. I am the state, as he famously said, or maybe not famously said. That might be a misappropriated quote, like perhaps Marie Antoinette. But yeah, King Louis the 16th, obviously a massively important death because of the Enlightenment period, the talk of egalitarianism, political ramifications from the French Revolution are still echoing even today. Chairman Mao of China, who was the Chinese communist leader, was asked, I believe, in the 60s, so what do you think of the French Revolution? And he replied, it's still too soon to say. So yeah, that brings me on to my number one choice. And if this isn't number one in WatchMojo's opinion, then WatchMojo is wrong, because this is definitely number one. It is Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his assassination by Gavrilo Princip in 1914. I mean, do we need to even say any more about this? This is the one that ushers in World War One, and World War One is the war that ushers in World War Two. It is literally the death that changed the world. And if that is not number one on WatchMojo's list, WatchMojo is wrong. But let's see and enjoy their list.
Mohammed Reza Pahlavi, Persia's last emperor, was a key figure in world politics in the second half of the 20th century.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're discussing the most significant world events that either came to fruition or were set in motion following the demise of a specific figure.
It's very easy to look at Alexander's conquests and see him as a sort of fly
Alexander, showing highlights.
The Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. It's entirely accurate to label the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand as...
What? Number 10! Number 10! Okay, I'm in shock. I don't know what number one will be, or number 9. But yeah, okay.
Early catalyst for World War One.
Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Today, he will be assassinated. This is the spark which will ignite the First World War.
That said, it is perhaps satisfactory to describe it as the proverbial tinder and flint which helped light the fire.
Yes.
Tensions over the edge. The Archduke of...
Yeah, the powder keg of Europe, as Wilhelm II called it, the Balkans.
Yeah, his wife were shot in Sarajevo by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb student. The assassination followed a failed bombing attempt on Ferdinand's motorcade.
At the last moment, the Archduke sees the bomb coming and raises his arm to protect his beloved wife. The driver accelerates, and a grenade bounces off the back of the car.
Princip didn't act alone. He was part of the separatist group Young Bosnia, which received support in their actions from the Serbian secret organization Black Hand. World War I certainly loomed large at the time of Ferdinand's death. This event effectively codified its inevitability.
6 weeks up.
Yeah, well, the link between the Black Hand Gang and the Serbia and other groups probably did happen, but it's tentative. It's hard to find out how involved they were.
Bullet. The alliances were triggered. Germany invaded France, and the First World War had begun.
Abraham Lincoln.
So yeah, I'm in shock that is number 10. But yeah, if you want to read more, I highly recommend learning more about the assassination attempt on the day. It was completely chaotic. As I pointed out in the video, a bomb did go off earlier in the day when they were on their standard motorcade transport, but then a couple of his personal bodyguards were injured, so he wanted to go to the hospital. to go and obviously check on them and his condolences and thank yous. But then as the driver misturned on a corner, he turned right into Gavrilo Princip. And Gavrilo Princip could not believe his luck. So number 9, they've put Abraham Lincoln. Both of these obviously appeared in my top 10, but obviously in a slightly different order. Let's see what they've got to say about Lincoln.
We're all taught in school about how actor John Wilkes Booth assassinated President Abraham Lincoln during a play at Ford's Theater.
For Lincoln, finally, this punishing war has come to an end, and he's able to feel a sense of that the country is going to go forward. I've done my part as a leader, and he only has 5 days to appreciate that before he's killed.
What's also interesting are the consequences that followed, specifically during the subsequent presidency of Andrew Johnson. The former vice president failed to deliver upon Lincoln's plans for a post-war reconstruction of the South due to his desire to assist wealthy white Southern conservatives.
Johnson implements a plan of reconstruction which puts control of the Southern states back into the hands of the white population.
Johnson's undeniable racism ultimately led to a Reconstruction era that was plagued by carpetbagging Northern opportunists and an overarching sense of failure. His relentless conflict with Congress led to him becoming the first American president to be impeached and paved the way for increased congressional influence in American politics.
Finally, the bad blood spilled over. President was impeached and escaped removal from office by just 1 vote.
Julius Caesar.
Yeah, he probably shouldn't have, really, looking back on history. He got very lucky surviving that impeachment. He definitely should have been impeached and was not a good president. Again, I'd say he was the worst president. So yeah, it touched on a lot of what I said about it setting back the cause of Reconstruction and the cause of civil rights in America for a generation. In terms of actually putting Andrew Johnson on the ticket, it was deemed he wanted a unification ticket, so Lincoln decided to put a Democrat on the ticket with him. So that's why we had the Democratic Vice President Andrew Johnson being put on the ticket. Of course, that massively backfired when he got killed just a few days into his second term. Yeah, I think they're second terms because the inauguration used to be, well, it is in January nowadays, but it used to be in March all the way up until FDR. So yeah, he'd have just started his second term. So number 7, they've got Julius Caesar. Again, he was in my top 3. I put him a lot higher, but let's just see what they've got to say about
the history of Rome dates back to antiquity, with the establishment of the Roman kingdom circa 753 BC.
The most powerful man Rome has ever seen. Still trying official. Long-serving senators might not take well to it. Even Sulla was careful with them, not to make them feel disrespected. I'll do nothing but bury their lives.
The death of Julius Caesar, meanwhile, would signify the onset of a chaotic civil war, the demise of Rome's republic, and the rise of an empire. March 15th, a date popularly known as...
So funny is the senators that did it, they killed him because they called him a tyrant, and he was pushing towards kings that they'd kicked out. Obviously, Rome was founded as a monarchy, and then they kicked out their kings around the year 500 BC. I believe Tarquin was one of their last kings. And then ever since then, they've believed very much not one-man rule, that no one should be a king. And that was an embodiment of the Roman Republic, that no one man should ever have that amount of power ever again. And obviously Caesar was beginning to accumulate that kind of power through his being a general, a very popular general who was very popular amongst the people. So then they killed him, and they killed the tyrant, and they ended up ushering in 400 years of one-man rule. So good job, guys. Good job.
Ides of March memorializes Caesar's assassination by Roman senators.
Once the deed was done,
Merry Beard
turned out to have no forward plan. What they got was civil war, which ended up producing one-man rule, emperors.
It was the culmination.
Yeah, Mary Beard, excellent historian. She makes excellent documentaries for the BBC. I'd highly recommend checking her out if you can.
Of a grand and infamous conspiracy involving over 50 of Rome's public servants, including Caesar's close compatriot Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus's reputation is now divisive. While some vilify him as one of history's greatest traitors, others regard his actions as heroic and a courageous stand against Caesar's lack of political accountability.
So Caesar's assassination only served to strengthen the very thing it meant to destroy.
Saddam Hussein. The
So yeah, that kind of sums up why the importance of Julius Caesar's death is. I don't know about this a hero or a traitor. Don't quite know where we could put. I don't know quite where we could put him on the line on that spectrum between traitor and hero. But for me, he was just another scheming, another politician, really, just like all the other senators in Rome who just didn't like Julius Caesar acquiring a lot of power, but then also didn't think about what the alternative was. You've always got to think about, yeah, they didn't realise the ramifications of what they were doing, I don't think. So yeah, now we're moving on to one that I didn't include on this list, and one who actually died in my lifetime. I remember him actually being killed, Saddam Hussein. But yeah, let's see what they've got to say about this.
Iran-Iraq War was fought in part to prevent Iran's post-revolution influence from seeping into Iraqi President Saddam Hussein's Ba'athist Sunni government.
Along with the United States, much of the Arab world sided with Iraq in a war that had no winner.
Throughout this bloody conflict,
Yep.
Saddam remained in power, with his war efforts being silently backed by the United States. However, his invasion of Kuwait in 1990 led to a direct confrontation with the American military during the Gulf War.
Gulf War, probably America's most successful war in recent history. I mean, if you're talking about, we had the more recent failed invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, and of course, we also can look back to Vietnam in terms of military successes of the last 50 years. It's not been that great for America, really. This is definitely their best they've done. And George H.W. Bush thought that this war would secure him his second term, but that didn't work out for him.
Invasion was to sow the seeds of Saddam's downfall, as powerful allies deserted him. In January 1991, American-led forces launched a massive assault on Iraqi troops occupying Kuwait.
Following 9/11, American pressure on Saddam increased, leading to the invasion of Iraq.
That's a very famous image of the statue being toppled. This was shown around the world at the time, and it was kind of, yay, victory. No, we didn't win.
He was later convicted of crimes against humanity and executed in 2006.
Verdict was predictable. Saddam was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging.
This event ultimately opened the doors for the aforementioned Iranian influence, theocratic philosophies to permeate not only Iraq, but also large sections of the Middle East. Mahatma Gandhi,
Yeah. It seemed that the more we got involved in the Middle East, the more the West messed up the Middle East and destabilized it. Next, we've got Mahatma Gandhi, and this is another one I didn't include on my list, but yeah, it's a bit of a 20th century focused list, American focused from WatchMojo, but that is the audience they cater to, so I understand that.
The aftermath of Mahatma Gandhi's assassination was one of grim irony, sharply contrasting with his message of non-violence. On January 30th, 1948, Gandhi was assassinated.
Yeah, a non-violent protester, just kind of like Martin Luther King, also famously assassinated.
By one Nathuram Godse while on his way to a prayer meeting.
He took 3 steps, bowed before Mahatma Gandhi, and he shot him point blank 3 bullets.
Godse was a Hindu nationalist who objected to Gandhi's compassionate stance towards displaced Muslim nationalists in the aftermath of British colonialism in India. After Gandhi's death, public displays of mourning unfolded, which were juxtaposed against violent riots in areas such as Mumbai.
Despite his efforts, violence between Hindus and Muslims continued, and despite his efforts, India was fractured in two.
Gandhi's demise would forever raise questions as to what routes modern-day Pakistan would have taken had his peaceful ethos been allowed to continue, as India navigated the political landscape post-British Raj. Alexander the Great.
Yeah, of course. India and Pakistan today are enemies. They're not best friends. They've both got nuclear weapons. They both argue over areas of land like Kashmir. Obviously, India at the moment has elected Narendra Modi, and he is a Hindu nationalist, kind of like the person who assassinated Gandhi. So yeah, it's definitely still echoing even through to this day. And now we're on to Alexander the Great. Yeah, he makes pretty much any top 10 list of any history video. Alexander's probably going to be on there, and here he is again.
It's difficult to know exactly how vast Alexander the Great's empire would have become if he hadn't succumbed to fever and disease at only 32 years of age.
He contracted.
Yeah, 32 years of age. There's still rumours going around that he died of poisoning. He died of alcohol poisoning. He drank himself to death, but no. died of a pretty standard common cold type thing. Yeah, people still want to attribute some kind of epic, awesome death to him because he was such an epic, awesome person.
Fever, possibly malaria, and on the 10th of June, 323 BC, after
He
a night
died.
of heavy drinking, Alexander died. He was a month short of his 33rd birthday.
What is known, however, is that Alexander's lack of foresight with regards to his line of succession resulted in chaos, civil war, and turmoil. Today,
Yep, yep, it did. He did have a younger brother or an older brother. The brother was kind of never seen as the next in line. Then he had a young son, but the young son was literally a baby, so he couldn't run an empire like that.
The
It cost his
concept of
empire.
East versus West is largely attributed to the fracturing of Alexander's empire, which stretched to roughly 2 million square miles.
His conquest had opened the East to a flood of Western and Greek influence, and the contact between cultures was to have a lasting effect on European and Asian civilization.
Nonetheless, Alexander's demise ultimately proved that his control over this empire was tenuous at best. It didn't take long for rebellions to break out over the command of this collapsing house of cards.
After his death, that legend became an inspiration to many who dreamed, but ultimately failed to follow where he had led.
Moctezuma II, the day.
So yeah, we did have the establishment of the Ptolemaic kingdom. Ptolemy was a general underneath Alexander. And I'd say that's probably the most successful of the post-Alexander the Great empire. But yeah, it did immediately just fracture upon his death. So yeah, the question is about what if? What if he easily could have lived another 30 years into his 60s? So yeah, the constant question of what if. I think people like Henry V kind of have a what if about him as well, because he died very young as well, just before securing the crown of France. Yeah, what if he had also survived? So yeah, now we're on to Montezuma II. Of course, he was killed by the Spanish conquistadors.
Of the Aztec Empire were effectively numbered after the death of Moctezuma II on June 30th, 1520.
Over the course of 2 years, a single ruthless man was able to forge an alliance which destroyed the gorgeous city, rooted out its ancient religion, and created a new realm for his king.
The manner of the Aztec emperor's death has been disputed, with most agreeing that he was stoned to death by his own people following a failed negotiation with the invading Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés.
Perhaps even before Moctezuma was able to word danced had to fly at him.
Still, others believe that it was Cortés himself who did the job. While that remains up in the air, what is certain is that the conquistadors narrowly escaped Aztec land with their lives, and then came back for vengeance. Cortés's war.
Yes, they originally didn't land with too many troops. They were landing with about, definitely not thousands of people, but yeah, then they came back with a vengeance, and that's when you get the Spanish conquest of most of South America, Central America, even stretching up into parts of North America. It places along the western coast of America, California. A lot of that's named after Spanish settlers and explorers that are around this time.
Attrition decimated the city of Tenochtitlan, setting the stage for further European colonial efforts in the New World.
The situation that existed in the final siege of Tenochtitlan was very different. And surely the Aztecs who were fighting must have realized that. They must have seen that it signaled the end of their empire.
Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. It's entirely possible.
So yeah, it really did signify the end of the Aztec Empire. Again, I mean, that was an empire that had existed in America for about 200-ish years. Started around the 11th, 12th century, and obviously ended when the Hernan Cortez came. In terms of deaths that changed world history, I mean, I guess it's kind of symbolic of the Columbian Exchange that started after Columbus discovered America, and the Europeans discovering America, taking a lot of the fruits and other resources from natural resources from America. Yeah, so it is kind of symbolic of that, but I don't know. I won't personally put it so high myself.
Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. It's entirely possible that the cultural landscape of modern-day Iran might look drastically different had the Iranian Revolution not taken place back in 1979.
See the last Shah of Iran, and then we have the introduction of the Ayatollah. And if you look at images, I believe, in the 60s, it seems quite culturally Western or open-minded liberal. So you see women in bikinis and that kind of thing, much more Western in your imagination. But then we have the Ayatollah come in, and it becomes much more religiously conservative, and especially in the Middle East in general, starts becoming a lot more religiously conservative, especially since this happened in the late 70s. So yeah, definitely an important death. Again, I don't know if it's making my top 10, but yeah, definitely an important death that's still having ramifications for us in the Middle East even today.
The Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, espoused a political ideology known as the Great Civilization, where Iran would emerge as a global superpower with idealized socio-economic conditions for its people.
I think that our country in the next 10 years will be what you are today. In the next 25 years, according to other people, I'm not saying that, will be among the 5 most prosperous countries of the world.
His reign was also notable for how Iranian
That's the kind of leader I want. A leader that wants the country to be successful. Seems like a good idea to me.
Western fashion and music trends, rather than enforced Islamic fundamentalism. Following the revolution, Pahlavi was forced into exile, and Iran's cultural trajectory shifted towards a clerical theocracy under the leadership of Ayatollah Khomeini.
During his 10-year reign, he implemented his ideas of an Islamic revolution with uncompromising vigor and turned Iran into a theocracy.
The Shah, meanwhile, died in exile on July 27, 1980. Vladimir Lenin. Few figures from the
So Iran still is run by the equivalent of the inheritance of the and obviously the Shah. Yeah, that kind of political philosophy has not been seen in the Middle East since. Now we're on to an interesting one. Vladimir Lenin. I was contemplating putting him in mind because obviously when Lenin dies, obviously you get Stalin in charge, and Stalin was not a nice man. Stalin was a very evil man. So maybe the history of the USSR would have been a lot different. You had a lot more like equal rights for women was being proposed by Lenin, and a lot more liberal progressive things that would just be immediately shut down by Stalin. Yeah, certainly an important death.
Vladimir Lenin. Few figures from the former Soviet Union socio-political sphere are as polarizing and controversial as Vladimir Lenin. The life of this former Soviet head of state saw his administration rise to power via the...
Yeah, of course, he rose to power in World War One because the Germans ferried him into Russia and hoped that he would cause a revolution into World War One, which he did. And it worked to plan for the Germans, and it cleared up the Eastern Front for them so they could focus on the Western Front. Well, unfortunately for the Germans, around the same time, America entered the war, so it didn't really work out for the Germans.
October Revolution of 1917, deposing Russian Tsar Nicholas II. This armed coup allowed for Leninist communist politics to shape the Soviet Union's political course for decades. Yet it was Lenin's death in 1924 that created an opportunity for change, a vacuum that would allow the dictatorship of Joseph Stalin to emerge. Some historians argue that both Lenin and Stalin were dictators, albeit Russia's legacy of political
pretty much true.
Was further inflamed after Lenin's death. Before we unveil our...
Lenin was definitely a dictator as well, and it was very much his way, or it's his way of arguing with Lenin, and it was the same with Stalin. But I would argue that Stalin was much more ready to set up death camps and just murder away. So yeah, both of them were definitely dictators. Both of them definitely did some very shady things. So, but Stalin's definitely a worse human being. So now we get some honourable mentions. I wonder if maybe some more of my top 10 will be in here. I don't think Socrates will be making an appearance in WatchMojo, but we'll see. Obviously here we've got Martin Luther King, assassinated in 1968. Robert F. Kennedy gave a great speech about his assassination that I'd recommend anyone to watch. Just before he himself would be assassinated about 3 weeks later. Yes, certainly an important death for the civil rights movement.
Top pick. Here are some honorable mentions. Martin Luther King Jr. His dream lives on. The fight for social justice never ends.
He was an American martyr, a man who broke through the barriers of segregation with a philosophy of nonviolence.
Ngo Dinh Diem. His death via a...
Yep, Incredibly sad death. Absolute tragedy that he was killed.
CIA-backed coup led to more American troops in Vietnam.
The end came to power in 1950.
Oh my god. Oh my god, this was stupid. My god, this was stupid. From Vietnam, it's just one long headache of just incompetent decision after incompetent decision. And yeah, DM was, yeah, he was not good.
This country had been split in two a year
The South was always going to fall.
Yitzhak Rabin. His assassination placed more distance between Israel, Palestine, and peace.
Fallout of that traumatic loss inflaming hardliners on both sides of the conflict.
Yeah, still, the conflict is raging today, even worse. There's some more bombing that's been going on even today, just in Lebanon, the Israelis. So, yeah, the tensions have been rising and rising in that part of the world. And yeah, I can see how the death of a notable leader like that would then inflame more tensions.
His assassination was a tremendous blow to the peace process.
Israel soon drifting rightward in the vacuum of a strong leader pushing for peace.
President John F. Kennedy, ground zero for the
Yep, he was number 10 on my list. But yeah, I didn't think his death personally changed the course of history much. So a lot of what his legacy was, the civil rights, the space race, landing on the moon, that was all accomplished posthumously by other people who carried on his legacy. But yeah, just in terms of media reporting and how you go about reporting a big news event, a lot of it ties back to when Kennedy was shot, the shots that were heard around the world.
American optimism and conspiracy culture.
On November 22nd, 1963, President Kennedy and the First Lady arriving in Dallas on that day that would change America. That tragic trip through Dealey Plaza. The first couple riding through that winding road in Dallas.
Right, so number one, they put Jesus Christ, JC himself, the big man. Yeah, I didn't put him on my list myself because there's not much historical evidence, archaeological evidence that he existed. So it's hard to rate that and evaluate that. So for me, I just left him off the list because of that reason. But certainly, if he did exist, and regardless of whether he existed or not, his story and the legacy of what has come from his story has changed the world irrevocably. Is part of the number one world religion, Christianity. Even in Islam, he's considered a prophet. So in most of the world's religions, he's considered a prophet. What I do like about Jesus is he was a big hippie who was just peace and love to everybody. Turn the other cheek, let ye who is without sin cast the first stone. He was a big peace, hippie, love to everybody kind of guy. But the conservatives who read him are very not that, so it comes across a bit weird to me. But yeah, his actual message of blessed are the meek, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than the rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. All that stuff, amazing, great. I love that stuff.
Jesus Christ. Christianity is the world's largest religion, with around a third of the global population adhering to its basic tenets. The figure of Jesus Christ sits at the center of these tenets, a singular figure whose life, death, and prophesied resurrection serve as the foundation of the faith.
The most famous death in history is the death of Jesus of Nazareth.
Not coming to my list.
2,000 years ago, in 1st century Jerusalem, he was
I think Caesar were more.
The Christian Bible describes the life of Jesus for believers, while historical and archaeological evidence paints contextual pictures for those outside of its religious sphere of influence.
The crucifixion of Jesus came to have an immense political significance on a much grander scale, in that his followers founded a new religion.
It is fair to point out that religious cultures all over the world possess their own important mythologies. However, the sheer vastness of Jesus Christ's impact over the world continues to be felt long after the biblical accounts of his death.
What does this mean? Not the one that we had all of these expectations about has been crucified. How do we deal with this? Not merely the end of this life, but the shameful.
Yeah, crucifixion was just a very normal Roman execution. It was a kind of torturous form of execution, incredibly painful, definitely one of the worst deaths you could suffer in the ancient world. You'd essentially be unable to breathe because of how you were positioned, and then you'd have to pull yourself up to catch catch some breath, and eventually that you won't no longer be able to do that, as well as the pain from the stigmata through your hands and feet. It was a very, very unpleasant death that the Romans used as an exemplar to its people and to its enemies. Don't mess with Rome.
What are your thoughts on some of these historical figures? Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, I think you did pretty well. So yeah, I'd say in conclusion, yeah, pretty good video from WatchMojo. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like, hit comment. If there's any other videos you want me to check out, please look right down below. I will check it out later. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.